G'day mates, my name is Mordecai and welcome back to the show, where a new player seeks knowledge on how to be a better player at the table. One of my favourite and underappreciated game genres is the roguelike genre. These games are typically defined by a mix of procedurally generated content and permadeath. In a way, this converts into an appreciation for tabletop role-playing games, as anything can happen, including plot elements that were not accounted for by the party or the dungeon master. This does mean that sometimes events don't go according to plan, which can lead to the need to improvise and figure out an alternative strategy on the fly. It can lead to inconveniences, sure, but those can lead to newfound considerations for overall play. See failure as a chance to learn about how to do something better. Today's story is about a player who wanted their plans to be conducted in exactly the manner they envisioned, and is unhappy with how the events turned out. This story is titled, Player at Table Gets Easily Agitated When Things Don't Go Exactly His Way, Exactly the Way He Wants, and is written by Cupcake Pantry. So, I'm in a group with some friends playing a weekly game, and we all love it and our characters. But sometimes one of our players, we'll call him Dustin, gets bent out of shape really easily, and last week was a total fun sucker for me. So Dustin has a character that generally likes to lone wolf it, despite being a part of a group. One of the other characters is his backstory established wife, so it's not as if he has no connection to what we're doing as the overarching plot of the game. It's hard in character to get them to talk with the other player characters or even let them help him when he is out doing dangerous stuff. That by itself? Totally fine, and I like the character work from that dynamic. But last week, things got especially bad. So he, for reasons I will not get into, wanted to murder an NPC that was a threat to another NPC. Okay, cool, totally fine. The murder victim in question is a person in a position of power, and an evil one at that, with a live-in bodyguard to boot. Even though his wife would have problems with him doing this, both the wife's player and myself were excited to see what would happen actually. This isn't the first time Dustin has had a run-in with this particular NPC either. Dustin has a tendency to take up entire sessions when he goes off on his own as well. Again, that doesn't really bother me. Sometimes it gets crazy, and it's always a joy to listen to. Our DM, in the previous encounter with this NPC, gave me and the wife player the character sheets for the NPC and his bodyguard, so we would have something to do and not just be there sitting and hanging out. So we were handed those sheets again for this encounter. Now, I'm not attached to this NPC at all. They're a side character, and frankly don't have any impact on anyone's stories except Dustin's. But I wanted to play him realistically, as if I were invested in his survival and not just a vehicle for Dustin to get to look cool. So, the scene. Dustin breaks into this NPC's house from the bedroom window and prepares to knife them. I ask the DM privately if my character would have any traps or defenses set up. He asks me if I have any spells on his sheet that would let me do that. I don't. Wife, now bodyguard player in the private chat with me, tells me that they have the alarm spell and that they can cast it as many times as they want. Great, the DM says, and allows the bodyguard player to figure out a good way to alarm this room. It's a hexagonal room with windows on each face and a staircase at the opposite wall of the bed. The bodyguard alarms the space on either side of the bed and the staircase landing. Dustin, not knowing the exact areas where the alarm spell has been cast, but knowing the spell was used through context clues, starts hopping on furniture, floor is lava style, to get to the bed. I'm rolling my eyes a little at this point because he's never done such a thing before when breaking into someone's house, but okay, I'll give him the mulligan. He gets on the bed, not knowing that the alarm spell contains the portion of the bed he's standing on. Alarm goes off. The NPC I'm playing wakes up and dimension doors down to his bodyguard's bedroom to wake him, telling him there's a man in his chambers. At this point, Dustin gets huffy and says, I mean, I don't know how they knew I was coming, but okay. I shrug, and out of character say, you're not the only person who they could be scared is going to assassinate them. which makes plenty of sense for this particular NPC. The point is dropped, and we move on. A fight ensues, and it eventually comes to pass that the bodyguard starts begging the NPC to flee. I don't do that, and instead stay and fight within a sliver of my health. I get KO'd. The bodyguard picks up the NPC in his arms to try and run. Dustin continues to attack the NPC's near lifeless body, and I fail all my death saves. With the NPC dead, the bodyguard attacks Dustin and knocks him out in 2 final hits. The bodyguard ties Dustin up and removes his weapons. He takes NPC's body into the streets, begging for a cleric. DM says there isn't a cleric in range that is a high enough level to help. Dustin is agitated at this point. He asks if there's anyone to help him. The DM says there are servants in the house, but he doesn't know if they'd help. Dustin seems somewhat bewildered by this, like they're supposed to help an assassin that tried to kill their employer in his own house? I have no idea. The DM rolls on a percentile die to let it be up to fate instead. Nope, no one is willing to help, but they are watching. Dustin makes his death saves and complains the entire time. He succeeds by rolling a natural 20, upping himself to 1 hit point and being conscious again. He asks to get out of the bonds he's been tied with and says that, "I've got thieves' tools and daggers all over me." The bodyguard player reminds the DM that they disarmed Dustin before leaving. Dustin dramatically asks, "What? You searched my entire body before trying to find someone to cast Revivify?" And I start to get a sour taste in my mouth. The DM hops in and says that his hands are restrained, so he'd have to do this without weapons regardless. Dustin makes his saves and rolls to untie himself without issue, and flees the scene. The escape itself is hand-waved, and Dustin goes to lick his wounds and complains that the DM made it so unfair, and was just trying to make it harder to do, and generally just being rude, and a jerk. I am immediately uninterested in playing further. I shut down and stop engaging because I'm so angry with Dustin's bad attitude and monopolization of the night. The rest of the session is spent on Dustin as well. There's a whole scene with him and the NPC he was defending with his murder of their rival. The NPC in question is peeved off, because they'll be implicated if not at least a suspect, and tells Dustin to leave town and never come back. I didn't really care to pay attention beyond the end of the night where he fled town, alone, whilst my actual character and his actual in-game wife are sitting in their in-rooms none the wiser to this. He leaves a note with his mother and that's it. He claims it's safer this way. All in all, I couldn't care less that he did it. What I'm upset about is how he decided to react at the slightest obstacle. With the level Dustin was at compared to the NPC, there was no real contest for him. The DM was trying to make it engaging for all of us, and to give it some actual stakes by letting the other 2 players at the table be a part of it in some small way. Dustin metagamed and showed his tail feathers the entire time, and had absolutely no consideration for anything but his own character and how cool he was, or wasn't. I was at the point where I just said goodnight at the end of the game and logged off instead of talking about the game for hours, like we normally do at the end of the night. I intend to keep playing and I still consider him to be one of my best friends, but that whole bad attitude about it just rubbed me the absolute wrong way. I really hope this doesn't continue to linger in my mind while we play, but if this keeps up, I don't know, man. And that's the end of the story. Inconveniences and obstacles to overcome, especially if they make sense, are a central part of any form of play. I actually think it was really clever for the DM to find an interesting way to have the other players at the table participate as part of Dustin's little side adventure that he wanted to do solo, without consideration for the other characters in the party. A tabletop role-playing game isn't a roguelike video game with a solo adventurer and maybe the rare companion to assist. It is, however, pretty clear to me that Dustin was causing issues at the table, from the Mulligan metagaming about knowing that the alarm spell was in play, the desire to be the edgy lone wolf character, to throwing a temper tantrum simply because he got caught and didn't want the consequences as a result of his own actions. For me, there are multiple lessons to learn as a new player, although I think the biggest one to take away is to have considerations for the other players at the table, and even for the entire game. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe and leave a like. It's free to do, and you can change your mind later. If you have any thoughts on this story or feedback on how it can improve, feel free to leave a comment. Again, thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you all next time.